In the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, the set bonuses that you used to get from using 6 of the same rune have been turned into a new item called a relic. These relics can be added and removed from your character on the fly, offering different bonuses and utilities based on your profession, build, and squad composition. My name is Chef, and in this video we're going to look at some relic choices that are specific to World vs. World, some common misconceptions about what relics might be good, as well as how some relics that aren't good individually might be good when used across an entire squad. As always, these videos are broken into chapters so that you can navigate to the particular section that you want to hear about. With that said, let's jump right in. We're going to cover some profession-specific interactions in just a bit, but I want to start with the role that specific relics play, rather than what relics are good for what professions. Given that framing, let's begin by talking about some of the relics added in Secrets of the Obscure that favor support playstyles specifically. Relic of the Monk and Relic of the Herald. At first glance, these appear to be obvious choices for support-oriented professions, since they increase outgoing healing and boon duration respectively. But on playing with them a bit more, I don't actually think they're all that great, and there's two reasons for that. Each of these relics provide a stacking effect whenever you grant a boon to an ally. The stacking effect lasts for 3 seconds and stacks up to 10 times. But there's also a 1 second internal cooldown on these stacks, so in practice, you have to apply a boon every 2 seconds in order to maintain uptime of the entire stack, otherwise it all goes away. It's not impossible to apply a boon every 2 seconds, but it definitely isn't trivial. The second issue with these relics is also tied to this 1 second internal cooldown. It means that to achieve your full 10 stacks, you need at least 10 seconds of applying boons. In World vs. World, that's a long time, and some classes have an easier time pre-stacking boons than others before a fight begins. If you want to look at the uptime of these relics in more detail, they are captured by arc DPS logs, and you can test for yourself whether you're generating good uptime with them. I've included a handful of my own logs in the video description if you'd like to compare yourself to those as well. But even if you get all these factors to work in your favor, the payoff still isn't that good, considering the third contender for the support relic slot, Relic of Antitoxin. Unlike Relic of the Monk and Relic of the Herald, Antitoxin is always on. It applies to every condition cleanse you generate, and while it does have a relatively long internal cooldown at 5 seconds, it requires no additional management of stacks or cooldowns. Even on support professions with relatively low overall cleanses, Antitoxin is a powerful effect, and is generally my default choice for a relic on any support profession. Now that said, rules exist to be broken, and there's a handful of support professions that have interesting interactions with specific relics, so let's take a look at each of those. First up is the king of support professions, Firebrand. And Firebrand is interesting because it has elite skills and heal skills with relatively low cooldowns of 25 seconds and 12 seconds respectively. As a result, there's a number of relics that Firebrand can make excellent use of. First is Relic of the Pack, which grants 4 seconds of super speed to you and nearby party members when using an elite skill. Super speed at a surface level isn't really a support boon, but it does mitigate the effects of movement impairing conditions like chill and cripple. It also helps you catch up to a commander if you find yourself off stack, so that you can better apply healing and boons to allies. On top of that, the times when you'd want to use a charge of your Mantra of Liberation, for example, a party member's been stunned in the tail and needs a stun break, or you need a small amount of stability to protect against an enemy group trying to push, are all situations where super speed would be really valuable to have. Baking super speed into your elite mantra charges gives a Firebrand player a lot more control over where they can position and how well they can get party members out of trouble, which makes Pack very interesting to use on Firebrand in particular. The other interesting support relic that's tied to your elite skill is the Relic of the Zephyrite, which provides pulsing protection and resolution to party members after using an elite skill. With an elite skill cooldown of 25 seconds, you get 5 of these pulses, and the boons conferred by the relic are affected by boon duration. Firebrand already has a number of sources of protection, off of Mace 3, Shield 4, and Courage 1, but the additional protection uptime from Zephyrite further reduces the incoming damage that your party is taking, and makes it easier to heal up your party members and keep them alive in a fight. A number of relics are also tied to your heal, such as Relic of the Flock, which gives barrier on heal skill usage with a 10-second internal cooldown. This is pretty good on support Firebrand as well, as the internal cooldown lines up well with the cooldown on your mantra charges. But this relic is even more interesting on support Vindicator. On this profession, your heal skill while inventory is moving your tablet around, which has no cooldown, and is a skill that you can spam anytime you have downtime in other parts of your rotation. Relative to Antitoxin, it does decrease your overall cleanses, which Vindicator already isn't great at, but its unique heal skill does mean that Flock is a solid option here. With support relics out of the way, the damage relics are significantly less complicated. If you have 4 more abilities with a cooldown greater than 20 seconds, you probably want to use Relic of Fireworks, and if you don't, you probably want to run Relic of the Thief. Thief is plus 5% strike damage all of the time, while Fireworks is plus 10% strike damage most of the time. That wraps up relic options for most damage and support professions, but it doesn't wrap up the video. And this is the part where I think things start to get interesting. There's a number of relics that have pretty weak effects individually, but become powerful when they're used by the majority of people in a squad. So to round this video out, we're going to talk about some relics that aren't necessarily good for a specific profession or to run as an individual person, but might end up being good if an entire squad uses them. The Relic of Cerus, when using an elite skill, creates a rotating line that strikes 5 enemies, dealing damage and corrupting a boon from each target it hits. Functionally, it's almost exactly the same as one tick from a Well of Corruption, with the only difference being that Cerus can be blocked by Aegis. By itself, one tick of a Well of Corruption isn't really that impressive, but it is a strong force multiplier, corrupting additional boons and spiking additional damage with every subsequent player that uses it. In order to maximize this opportunity, however, you'll need to make sure that different classes are using their elite skills at the same time, which may be a challenge depending on what professions are using the Relic of Cerus in your squad. For example, Scourges using Breach and Berserkers using Battle Standard are very unlikely to use their elite skills at the same time, so using Cerus on both these classes is unlikely to lead to a coordinated spike of damage and boon removal. The Relic of the Citadel, when using an elite skill, calls an artillery shot on the target of the elite skill, or the enemy closest to it, inflicting a stun that scales duration with the length of the skill used to trigger it. The artillery strike is delayed from the elite by about a second, and strikes 5 targets in total. Like the Relic of Cerus, the Relic of the Citadel is unlikely to have an impact alone, pun intended, but scales extremely well with the number of people using it. Get enough people in your squad using Relic of the Citadel, and the amount of stuns that are generated can overwhelm stability applications of a defending group. Also, like Cerus, however, these relic triggers all want to go off at the same time, and so it can be a challenge to use it across your entire squad, and guarantee that different professions are using their elite skills at the same time. Last, let's talk about Relic of the Unseen Invasion, and this one is a little different than anything else we've talked about so far. Unseen Invasion gives 2 seconds of super speed to yourself and nearby allies when you enter or exit stealth. And despite the Stealth Blast meta mostly being dead and gone, there are still a number of effects that can be used to grant stealth to an entire squad, such as Mesmer's Veil. Adding to the flexibility of Unseen Invasion is that the effect isn't tied to you giving stealth, it's tied to you entering stealth, which means that a profession with no reasonable way to stealth itself can still trigger this relic to give super speed to allies if it receives stealth from another profession. The super speed applications from this relic also stack, up to a maximum of 12 seconds. So all this to say, Unseen Invasion is by far the most flexible of the squad-based relics, and the one most likely to make an impact in World vs. World squads as something that you would want to comp for. In my mind, these are the current relics that seem like they're good enough to use in the context of World vs. World groups right now. There's some honorable mentions here, specifically Relic of Isgarin and Relic of Mabon, but it's possible that both of these relics are currently bugged, and so I don't really want to cover them here until we have a better understanding of how they're supposed to work. If there's a relic that I haven't covered here, or you disagree with me on any of the relics that we've discussed, let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to stay involved in the discussions that we have about the state of World vs. World in this community, there's a link to my Discord in the video description. Subsequent Living World episodes and expansions will almost surely add additional relic effects, and if you'd like my thoughts on whether those will be any good, make sure you subscribe to the channel to get notified when future videos come out. But until then, I've been Chef, and enjoy the rest of your day.